In issue 53 of Archie Sonic, Rosie tells the orphans she's looking after a bedtime story where Sally and her friends are the main characters, except Sally's a pirate. And while at first I didn't care about it because it was fiction within fiction anyways, the story itself is rather interesting, giving the main characters different roles than usual. The story itself is rather interesting and enjoyable, so it's about time I gave it the full analysis it deserves. It starts out with all three of Rosie's orphans being sick with a cold all at the same time. I assume they caught it from each other, but you'd think one of them would have a better immune system than the others, but I guess this makes sense. She brings them medicine, and one of them thanks her, and asks her to tell them a story. She says humbly that she's not very good at telling stories. They beg her to, and she agrees. It would be better to have the main characters' new roles in this bedtime story be naturally introduced to us one at a time. This is overwhelming. It's hard for me to be interested enough to read every text box. So one day, Pirate Sally was sailing in the lazily named Mobian Ocean with her first mate Bunny Bebop by her side. Seriously, it wouldn't be called the Mobian Ocean. That's like calling a place Earth Ocean. It's harder to tell that's supposed to be Bunny in this art, but her cyborg arm gave it away. She points out a fox falling from the sky. I find it annoying that her southern accent is written out so obviously. It makes it harder to read her dialogue. And while she's always had that problem, it's especially bad in this story. She says pollen from the sky instead of falling. She extends her arm to catch Tails before he'd fall into the water. But if he started falling from high up enough, it wouldn't matter. He'd still die the minute he stopped. And she caught him with her metal hand. If this was being realistic, he'd die from smacking into it anyways. Even falling into the water at a high up enough height would be like hitting concrete. It's a good thing Rosie justified that she isn't good at telling stories. So for all I know, all of the plot holes will be intentional. I don't feel that way, but it's fiction within fiction anyways. Of course it's not gonna make sense. Why was Tails even where he was? Where was he flying to? I have to assume Bebop is a cyborg for the same reason Bunny is, that Eggman was responsible. But this would be a good excuse to give her a creative new backstory. After all, if Eggman did this to her with magic, you'd think he'd use magic to brainwash her, or make her entirely a robot. So it has to be Uncle Chuck who did this to her. Tails says that one of his magic twin tails has been stolen by the rogue assassin Rouge as he was flying. So I guess they're gonna go after her and fight her for that. While I love that it's established that his tails are magical since it explains why he can fly with them just fine, it's still very confusing that one of his tails can be ripped off like it's nothing, and more importantly, since it could be explained away as Rouge having super strength in this story. Obviously the tail being ripped off would have a gory result and he'd bleed to death, unless it wasn't actually his tail and just attached to the outside of his body artificially. Even without a gory result, I can't buy that Rosie would think having this be a part of a children's bedtime story would be acceptable. Because you'd think the kids would be horrified and interrupt the story. And somehow, Sally and Bebop aren't horrified at this. Instead, after Bebop asks him if he's alright, Sally happily says that she'll have to steal it back for him. Good thing she has enough compassion to do that for him and Bebop cared enough to save him even though they're pirates. It'd be interesting to learn why people like them would become pirates. And it'd be pointless to make them pirates if they aren't going to do any pirate stuff. I wish the alternate universe's idea got as much creativity as this bedtime story, because they could do all sorts of changing of the roles of the main characters and still be interesting with little effort. The story cuts to Sally and Bebop riding on white horses they already conveniently have on land, despite being pirates. I'm forced to assume the horses were always on the land, because how could they take care of the horses on the pirate ship? It'd be so small and cramped. How'd she get her pirate ship? She's a teenager. I guess she was still a princess at some point, so she could have bought anything. Maybe she bought it as a kid before Robotnik, or rather, the evil wizard Kintobor. And Rouge is one of his henchmen, going on fancy too. I guess she actually supports him, which is more creative. It makes perfect sense that Eggman would be reinterpreted as a wizard, because mad science and magic produce the same results. They're not that different from each other. The heroes soon get lost in the woods. Sally says that she heard that Kintobor lives in a castle, but isn't sure where it is. At least it's creative for a wizard to live in a castle and not a tower. I guess he stole the castle. But apparently not from her family, where she'd already known for sure instead of just saying, "I heard." Either he actually did inherit the castle, or he stole it from a completely different royal family from hers. I guess that Sally was never a princess and became a pirate for the same reason real people did. Then whose castle did Kintobor take over? Antoine finds him in the woods and says that he's the wizard's jester, who happens to be all the way in the woods instead of in his castle because I guess he just likes taking walks in the woods in his free time. And he's immediately happy to try to escort them to the castle. I guess he wants Kintobor to be foiled in his plan. Maybe he wasn't told about what the word fool meant, so he's fine with calling himself that. Antoine takes him down the wrong way and end up getting chased by the Naugus rider, as suddenly there's a third horse that he's riding. I guess he showed up with this one in the first place. I wonder if Rosie thinks Antoine's an idiot and that's why she made him this way. Calling him the fool I can understand because he's the jester, but then she called him an idiot. Sonic shows up out of nowhere to hit away Naugus rider and has him lying on the ground afterwards. To be fair, it is logical that someone hitting someone away at Sonic's speed, or even close to it, would kill him in one hit. Maybe he doesn't know we killed him. Sonic's called a Blue Knight here. I guess he just wanted to take a walk in the woods for fun, and that's why he happened to be here. Soon they find their way to the castle, where the drawbridge is guarded by Mog the Troll, or rather Moggle in this story. You'd think a wizard wanting to protect his castle from intruders would summon a magical force field generator, not leave it to one guy. I guess that one guy approached him and told him he would guard his castle, and he didn't bother thinking of a different idea after that. I guess this version of Moggle doesn't aspire to the throne. He doesn't want to go over the world, because if he did, he'd just kill Eggman in his sleep, since he's so close to him, not work for him. But it's a different universe. Sally challenges Mog to a game of chicken, being brave, and uses her own speed against him with a sidestep, so Mog falls into the water, being gotten past easily with no action scene at all, even though this is mammoth freaking Moggle we're talking about. Though it is an alternate universe bedtime story, so I guess in this universe he's meant to be a joke, and is lacking the magical abilities he needs to avoid drowning after falling into the water. And I can understand why Rosie would probably want the catharsis of portraying terrifying bad guys that exist in her universe as complete jokes that would get defeated immediately after all the trouble they caused. Of course she'd hate them that much. It's an idealized version of her own world by comparison. There's not much of a point to it being Sally if she's gonna act like Sonic the whole time though. Kintobor tells the heroes they'll never get this tale. Sally's text bubble should be to the left of his. Otherwise, it just looks like she's blatantly ignoring what he just said and telling him to give it up anyways. He says the tale will give him magic to become the most powerful wizard ever. I thought he already was. I guess there's still some abilities he's incapable of, no matter what. I guess there are other wizards on this planet that are more powerful than him. And I guess they're better than him, morally. So that's why, if that was the case, they would take him down. I guess they don't know about him. Rosie sure hates Snively a lot if she portrays him as just a useless parrot instead of an actual character. It is symbolic how he was just a henchman yes-man to him. The entire team attacks at once, causing Kintobor to lose the tail. It does make logical sense that someone as fast as Sonic would hit Kintobor before he would do anything, and the sheer force of that attack would put him out of commission. After all, in Sonic the Comic, when Sonic was faced with a wizard, he attacked him before he could finish saying his spells, so the wizard was forced to undo all of his spells. It is very anticlimactic that he'd lose in one fight instead of a proper action scene. But I understand that it doesn't have the comic space at this point to have full action scenes for these villains, especially not when it's wasting so many pages on worthless advertisements. And even without doing that, it's just a side story. But at least I can say that it makes actual sense logically that the villains all got defeated so quickly. Tails gets his tail back. It immediately reattaches itself with no problem afterwards. It really is a magic tail. Tails thanks them all, and then says, "Especially you, Pirate Sally." But why show preference for her? None of them had any close friendship moments. It was Sonic who did most of the heavy lifting. He defeated two of the bad guys in one hit. Bebop was the one who saved his life and brought him to the people who would eventually bring him to Sonic. Even Antoine was useful because while he got them lost, if they hadn't gotten lost, they never would have met Sonic. I guess if Sally wasn't a pirate with a ship, Tails never would have met any of them. And sure, she defeated Mog, but still. I think Rosie's just showing too much preference to Sally for obvious reasons. And with that, Sonic takes Sally's hand and they live happily ever after, even though they showed no attraction to each other before this point. But to be fair, I guess we were supposed to just assume they were attracted to each other and it just wasn't mentioned in the story because that'd waste time. So it can make sense, but it still comes off as too sudden and forced. But it makes sense that she'd want a happy ending. At least Rosie's good at fast pacing. It's not a story arc dragging on forever and almost all of the heroes were competent. Surprisingly so. They weren't complete idiots at any point, making me mad at the story. I wish she could have written most of this comic, but sadly she's not real. One of the guys asked what happened to Kindlebor. He died from Sonic smacking into him at Sonic speed, obviously. Why does he think anything else happened? Of course, it makes sense to assume that Sonic wouldn't have the hearts to intentionally hit to kill. And with all of his speed experience, he'd know which speed is non-lethal and stick to that. One of the kids says that he doesn't understand the character's individual motivations. How does he not understand that? They wanted to help Tails. The end. One of them asks how Sonic and Sally fell in love so fast. That's answered by the obvious meta logic that Rosie ships the two together in real life. I just wish the story didn't end there and instead let me see how the kids would have rewritten the story. I guess we'll never know why Sally was a pirate. Well, that was still charming and interesting after I actually gave it a chance. This was by Roaming Chacon. I loved the refreshing change of pace where Sally was a pirate with Bunny, who extends her arm to catch Tails when he's going to fall into the ocean. It was also interesting that Antoine was a jester, stupidly leading her in the wrong direction through the woods, where Ixis, the horse-riding knight, went after her in the first place. And best of all, Tails' tails are confirmed to be magical. It's just that all the villains are defeated in one panel way too easily. It was impressively smart of Sonic in the story to directly attack Eggman though. It's sadder when he's smarter than the real Archie Sonic, who barely ever thought to do that. If only he was this smart in issue 224, he could just spin dash Ixis. I loved that the villains were reimagined with different designs, for all the good that did. It has Rouge not only working for Eggman, but also somehow rips one of Tails' tails off when he was flying, and somehow it wasn't a horrible, kid-unfriendly sight because of that. Somehow he didn't die from that. Why would Rosie tell a story where that happens? I love that his tail was acknowledged as being magical and that's why it was stolen though. It was going to make Eggman super powerful. And somehow Tails got it reattached extremely easily just because he wanted to. Rouge was reimagined as one of Eggman the Wizard's henchmen in the story. She's more interesting when she's more of a villain for a change. But I missed an opportunity by not explaining why Rouge would work for him. It didn't even explain why Sally and Bunny were pirates.